versus me giving you completely different problems and then you go home and say, I don't know what's going on. So, let's talk a minute about similar polygons before we look at these problems. So we're doing 7.2 similar polygons. So 7.2 similar polygons. Now for it to be similar polygons, they have to have a couple of things. So they have the same shape, but not necessarily the same size. So that means you're looking at two triangles, you're looking at two rectangles, you're looking at two of the same shapes, but one is going to be smaller than the other one. Because they're not going to have necessarily the same size. They could have the same size, but not necessarily. So don't think that they're going to have to be exactly the same size. They do have to have the same shape. So that's the first thing. They have to have the same shape, but not necessarily the same size. Now, I'm going to tell you a couple of things that they have to have. These are not any things that you can get around. So I'm going to put a little star here and I'm going to say must have. So I'm going to say must have because there's two of them. So the first one is going to be all angles, and I'm going to use the symbol, all angles congruent. So for them to be similar polygons, all the angles inside both of them have to be congruent. So they must have all the angles congruent. The second one is going to be that all the sides proportional. All sides proportional. So again, that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be the same. Okay? And I'm fixing to show you what that means. So they have to have the same shape and not necessarily the same size. That they have to have all the angles congruent, and they have to have the sides proportional. So let's look at what that actually means. So I could give you any shape, okay? You know, all those nice polygons that we talked about for the last test, you can have any of those shapes. So for example, if I gave you two parallelograms, okay, so what we've got here is we've got, of course, one bigger than the other. That's what it says. They've got to be the same shape, but not necessarily the same size. So as long as they're the same shape, they don't have to be the same exact size. Now, it also says that all the angles, of course, are going to be congruent. So we know then, let me go ahead and mark this, that this is the top, because they can turn these. So if that's the top of this one, this is going to be the top of this one. All this is, you know, for some of you this makes sense, some of you it might not, because if I turn these, it's going to be a little hard for some of you to figure out what's what. This, of course, is going to be the right side. This is the right side. Of course, bottom of both of them, and left on both of them. Now, that means that this angle and these are congruent. These are congruent. These are congruent. And of course, these are congruent. All the angles have to be congruent. So if they're not all congruent, then we're going to have a problem. And all the sides have to be proportional. So we know what proportional is, we just went through this. So if they're proportional, that means if this is 5, I've got 15 here. I've got 4 here, and I've got 12 here. I've got 7 on the bottom, and I've got 21 on the bottom. And I've got 6, and I've got 18. Now, it really won't matter. I mean, it kind of looks backwards, but it's okay. So, how are they proportional? Okay, so every number on this one has now been multiplied by 3 to get this one. So 5 times 3 gave me this one, 4 times 3 gave me this one, 7 times 3 gave me this one, and 6 times 3 gave me this one. So they're all proportional. I can't have 5 times 3 to give me this one, and then 4 times 7 to give me this one. They all have to be done by the same number. So if this is done by 3, they all have to be done by 3. If this is done by 5, then they all have to be done by 5 to give me these. Okay? Vice versa. So if they were all of these were multiplied by 2 to give me these, that's fine. But they have to be proportional. All the angles have to be congruent, and, of course, they have to be proportional. So what you're going to do is you're going to have to look at some of these, and you're going to have to figure out if all of these things are applying. And then, of course, we're going to have to solve some. Most of it's fairly easy. So that's the first thing that we're going to do. So I'm going to try my best not to show you 10 of these at the same time. So here's your first one. I want to know if these are similar. Just what we were doing a while ago. So what do I have to know? I have to know if all the angles are congruent and if the sides are proportional. So, first of all, and some of you may want to write these down. I mean, you know, these are fairly easy on the similar and not similar. But do the angles match up? This is yes, this is no. Yes. Because everybody can tell that this piece is shorter than this one. Same thing up here. This piece is shorter than this one. So you have to match the top with the top, of course the bottom with the bottom. So now, these top two and these top two, are they congruent? Yes, because they both have the same marks. Same thing with these two. These two both have one mark, and these two both have one mark. So yes, they're telling you the angles match up. What about the sides? Now again, it may not always be obvious to see things, like, like we had just a second ago, where I multiplied everything by 3. So what do we need to do to figure out if they are proportional? Set up your proportions. So set up your proportions and see. So take 2 of the sides out of the top one and take 2 of the sides out of the bottom one and see if they match up. I don't care what 2 sides, that's up to you. So take 2 of them. So I'm going to do it right here. So let's say, because since these 2 sides are the same, I'm not going to take both of them. So I'm going to take the 20 and I'm going to take the 29.5. So if I take 20 over 29.5, that should equal what? What do those 2 sides match up with? What does 20 match up with? 24. This was the top, and this is the top. So those 2 have to go together. So 20 should match up with 24, and 29.5 should match up with the 35.4. Now, how am I going to decide if these are proportional or not? Cross multiply. So if you cross multiply 20 times 35.4 and 24 times 29.5, I'm either going to get the exact same answer or I'm going to get 2 different answers. So if I cross multiply, I want to know if I get the exact same answer or if I get 2 completely different answers.
The same answer.
If it's the same answer, then that's going to tell you that they are proportional. If you get 2 completely different answers, that's going to tell you they are not. So what did I get when I multiplied?
780.
780 on both?
708.
708. So you got 708 and 708, I'm assuming. So, since they are both coming out to be 708, then that tells me they are proportional. So the angles match. Okay? So the angles matched. They were proportional. Okay? So what does that mean? They were similar. So because these 2 both worked, I know that my answer is similar. You can usually tell by looking at the angles, but you have to do the cross multiplication to find out about the proportion. But you better make sure you get the correct sides. If you don't match the sides up correctly, we're going to have a problem. Okay, does that make sense? Yes, no, maybe?
A little bit.
Okay, let's try another one. So here is number 2. So number 2, I've got these 2. Now again, some of them are obvious. You can tell by looking at them. But when you got decimals, it's a little bit hard. So we've got to check for what two things? Angles again, and if they're proportional. So we need to check for those two things. So, by looking at these two things, you should be able to tell about the angles. So, do the angles in these two match because they're congruent? Yes, because all the angles in both pictures are what? Angles.
Right angles.
They're all right angles. So the top picture has nothing but right angles. The bottom picture has nothing but right angles. So we know the angles work. Now, what about the sides? Everything in this top picture, what do I have to do to it to get this bottom picture? Multiply by 2. So 5 times 2 gave me 10. 5 times 2 gave me 10. 6 times 2 gave me 12. And 6 times 2 gave me 12. So every one of these is going to work out. So if it's obvious that everything in one picture is multiplied by 2 to get the other picture, you don't have to do the proportion. That's only if you cannot tell. Yes.
Is all the time is the angle gonna always be equal, or like are we gonna get something?
You're going to get some that may not be. Yes. So, if you want to do proportions, you can. But they're not necessary if you can tell by looking. So you can always do 5 over 10 equals 6 over 12 and cross multiply. You're still going to get the same answer. But if I can tell by looking, it's easier not to waste my time if I can tell by looking. Okay, let's try number 3. So let's get number 3 in here and see what we can do with number 3. So here's number 3. So again, on number 3, I need those two things again. So I need my angles, and I need to know if they are proportional. So now, by looking at these, what about the angles? Okay, again, just like the previous problem, they all have right angles, so I know it's going to work. Now, the proportion is the part that I need to work on. So I've got 20. This 20 matches up with this 25. And of course, 32 is going to match up with 55. So that's how I would need to set up my proportions if I cannot tell. And sometimes it's better to make sure than to guess, which is what some of you are going to do. So that means it would be 20 over 25 equal to 32 over 55. So all I did was match up the marks that I made. The top of each picture equal to the side of each picture. Yes. On the last one?
Mm-hmm.
That's because I could tell that the top one, all I had to do was multiply all of those by 2 to get the other picture.
No, not
The
that
one
one, the
before
one
that.
before that.
You did like
20, you did 2 sides.
you're right, I did. Sorry. That is my fault. You're right. It should be 20 over 32 equal to 25 over 55. You're right. Sorry.
Wait, why?
Because you're taking the 2 out of each picture. The same 2 out of each picture.
Okay.
Yes, that was my fault. Yes, so you want the 2 out of the same picture matched up with the 2 out of the same picture. Okay? But you want them in the same order. So if I do 20 over 32, then I want it as 25 over 55.
Okay.
Okay, so that's why I've got the marks on there. Okay? So 1 mark has to match up with 1 mark on the top, and 2 marks have to match up with 2 marks on the bottom. Okay? You with me? Okay. So you want the same picture matched up with the other picture. So now all you gotta do is cross multiply. So if you did 20 times 55, what are you gonna get? If mine was going right, you would get 1100. So if I go in this direction, I'm gonna get 1100. Now, if I go in the other direction and I do 25 times 32, what do I get?
800.
I get 800. So my angles match up, but do my sides? No, the sides do not. So the sides do not, so it's either both of them work or they don't work at all. So this one is not similar. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, you try number 4 here. You try number 4 and see what you can do with it. Now they've helped you out by putting the little parallel marks on here, so you can easily see which sides go together. So you're looking for angles, and you are looking to see if they are proportional. Just like we've been working on. Those are your angles. So you gotta decide, just like we did with the others. So, you know, previous to, they all had right angles. So they all match. So, are those two gonna match? Huh? Okay. So what does that tell you?
Miss Ellen, I got a question.
Okay.
Are we supposed, to, where are we supposed to use 115 and 110?
Well, those are your angles. So remember, you got to decide if the angles are congruent and if they're proportional. You gotta decide both of those. That's the only way it can be a similar. If those two don't work, if one of them works and one of them doesn't,
It's not,
then it's gonna be not similar.
okay.
That's either they both work or, we don't care. If only one of them works, it's still not gonna be similar. Okay, let's answer this question. Now, you had to decide if they were similar based on angles and on proportion. Now, again, it's either both of them work or neither. Okay, that's the way it is. So if I look at this and I do my angles and my proportions, do my angles work?
No.
No. So one of them has a 115, one of them has a 110. Those two do not match up. So a 110 is not equal to a 110. Sorry, a 115 is not equal to a 110. So that part does not work. So is there any need for me really to try the proportions? No. I mean, you can, but there's really no need, because is it ever going to be a similar? No. Because if this one does not work, I have no reason to try this one. It's either both of these get check marks and they both work, or as soon as this one does not work, I'm done and I go ahead and write not similar and move on to the next problem. Now, if you did the proportions, it's not really a big deal. It just means you wasted a little bit of time that you didn't have to do. I know as soon as these two don't work that it's not similar, and I don't have to do anything else. Because if I did the proportions, were they going to work? Yes, no?
Yes.
Okay, but if I put one check mark and one X, is that going to help me? No, still not going to work. So, as soon as I get one of them that is a no, the whole thing is a no. That's what you got to understand. If one of them is a no, the whole thing is a no. I don't have to go any further. So if the first one you try is a no, you don't have to do anything else. If the first one is a yes, then you have to try the second. Okay? Don't sit there and say, well, I didn't think I had to do the second one. The second one you do not have to do only if the first one is a no. So if you do the angle and it is a yes, you have to do the proportions. If the angles is the first one you try and it is a no, the whole thing is a no and you don't have to go any further. Does that make sense? Okay, for those who are actually listening to me. So that's the first thing you're going to do tonight. And you're going to look at that. Now, the second thing you're going to do is you're going to solve for x. Now, you're going to take those same shapes, and now you're going to solve for x. So I'm going to skip down here. I've got more, but I'm going to skip, and I'm going to go to problem 7. And I want to go down here, and I want to find x. So now, if I want to solve, they're not giving me any angles, they're not giving me anything. match up my sides. What side in the first one matches up with what side in the second one, and make my two proportions. And solve for x. So if you are looking at this problem, and you need to solve it, what are we going to do? So 6 is going to match up with what? What side does it match up with in this one? The 12 plus 3x. So you're going to match them up. So this side matches up with this side. Now this is not set up the exact same way as it was when we just did the similar and not similar. This is different. So it's matching up the two sides out of the two shapes. So it's going to be 6 over 12 plus 3x equal to what? The 3, because these two sides match up. So it'd be 3 over 18. So both pieces out of this one have to be on the top, and both pieces out of this one have to be on the bottom. So then, of course, it's solving the same way it was for your homework over the weekend. There shouldn't be anything different here. So start in this direction. So it's going to be 3 times both of these, and what am I going to get? 36 plus 9x. Now if I go in the other direction, you may need a calculator for that one. So 6 times 18 was going to give me what? 108. So then you should be able to finish solving the equation. So subtract 36. So 108 minus 36 was going to give me 72. So we have 9x equals 72. So when I divide both sides by 9, I should end up with x equals what? 8. So again, nothing hard about this. So you got to remember when you do this that it's going to be the two matching sides. So any questions? Okay, here's our next one. So on the next one, we've got this one. So they'll do what they've always done. They'll give you extra numbers just like they do in IXL. They'll give you extra numbers that you don't really need. So what pieces are we matching up?
3.
Okay, the 21 and the 7, and the x plus 2 and the 3. That 15.3, does it match up with anything? No, because there's nothing to match up with it in the second shape. So we're going to have to match up this one with this one, and then this one with this one. So that's how you're going to have to set it up. So again, I don't care whatever's on top because it's going to be the same fractions. It may just be upside down compared to what I write. and it's still gonna be the same. So if I write x plus 2 over 3, you may just have 3 over x plus 2. It's not a big deal. That just depends on how you write it. So then it would match up with 21 over 7. And then from there, you should be able to solve. So if I cross multiply, what am I going to get when I multiply by 7?
So 7x plus 14.
7x plus 14. Because 7 times x was 7x, 7 times 2 was 14. So now when I multiply in the other direction, I'm going to get what? 63. So I end up with 7x plus 14 equals 63. So now you should be subtracting 14. So if you subtract 14, what do you end up with? 49. So you end up with 7x equals 49. So when you divide by 7, x equals 7. So does this make sense? Because I don't want to spend, 15 minutes on this when you don't need 15 minutes. Okay, try one more on your own and then we'll move on from here. So you try number 9. And then we'll move on. So try number 9. And then we'll move on from here. I got it. Oh, no, no. You're welcome. You can tell his daddy whatever you need. Oh, yeah. Get it from his daddy. That's usually what I do when I can't get anything from him. I just go tell him his daddy. Okay. Give you about another second or two. Okay. Got one or two that are still finishing. Okay, most of us should be done. So what did we get for number 9? Should have gotten 8. So you should have found out on this one that x came out to equal 8. Did everybody find out that on number 9, x equals 8? If you did not, I need to know, because that means something happened somewhere.
I got 4.6.
Uh-oh. So what did you make your fractions?
10 over 15 equals 2x minus 4 over 8.
Okay. So that should have been fine.
He did it backwards.
Well, it wouldn't matter if it was backwards or not. So double check your multiplication, because that's the only thing I can think may have happened, because your fractions should be fine. Okay, so you got 10 over 15, should have been 8. Yeah, because if you put 15 on the top, I mean 15 on the bottom, then you should have had the 2x minus 4 on the bottom. Because you gotta have them in the same order. That's your problem. Okay, so you took the 10 out of the first one and put it on, out of the second one, put on top, then the 8 had to be on the top, yeah. So you just need to swap those two numbers. Yeah, that's your problem. What is it? Well, we can, but, we got a final coming up in December. On everything that we do. Okay, anybody else? Okay, so everybody's good to this point. Number 13. Now, number 13 says again you're solving for x. Now in this section they're giving you nothing but triangles. They're already telling you, I don't know that you can read this, but they're telling you that these are already similar. So they're going to tell you that these are already similar.
Oh, that's cool.
So, you know that ahead of time. They've also told you up there that triangle EFG is congruent to triangle EKJ. So, they're turning these, and they're not necessarily in the same direction, same order as the other ones. So they get you used to having them looking the same, and now they're going to all of a sudden turn them all, and now you got to make sure you match them up. And it doesn't necessarily have to be triangles, or I could give you anything. It's just in this section I've given you triangles. So, when you get your picture, you've got to know which piece actually matches up with which piece. Is it actually 11 matching up with 30, or does 11 actually match up with 2x plus 7?
11 matches up with 2.
Okay, how do you know that?
Because the 10 is on the side of the direction 7.
Well, you're supposed to tell me based on what it says at the top.
No, 10, wait, oh yeah, E matches up with E.
Okay? It says EF matches up with what?
EK.
EK. So if you look up here at the top, EF is going to match up with EK. So EF is this side. And it matches up with EK, which is this side. They're telling you which two go together. All you got to do is read the top of the paper. So if I know that part, then I automatically know the other two go together. So I know that this one is going to match up with this one. But I have to get them matched up correctly. If I don't match them up correctly, I'm in trouble. Because I'm going to make my proportions that don't look correct, and then I'm going to end up with the wrong answer. So now you're just doing the exact same thing that you did a while ago. So now set up your proportions, and you should be able to solve for X. The difference here is that if you do not match up the two sides correctly, we are going to have a wrong answer. So now what should our proportions be? And I don't care if you start with the top one or the bottom one, that's up to you.
11 over 2x plus 7
Okay, 11 over 2x plus 7
equals 10 over 30.
equals 10 over 30. So now that I know which two actually match up, I can now set up my proportions and I can solve. So now when I cross multiply, I'm going to get what? 20x plus 70 equal to, okay, say that again. I still don't understand.
330.
It's hard sometimes to understand y'all when y'all have those on, and I know you can't help that, but okay, 330. Now I understand what you were saying. So now, solve it. So that means we've got to subtract. So now I have 2x equal to what? 260. So when I divide by 2, x is going to equal what?
Yeah, I think.
I got 13.
I got 13.
Ah,
Me too.
I didn't put 20 there, I put 2. Sorry. So now, why did I do that? Okay, apparently I need to go home and start the day over. So now, I'm dividing by 20. Let's try that again. So now x is
13.
There we go, that's better. Okay. Now. Okay. So, any questions? So the only difference here is that you need to use this part up here to match up your sides first. So remember, this tells you that RS is going to match up with JK. So if you do not pay attention as to which sides match up, you're going to be creating a major problem in your own proportion. Okay? So read the top so that you know which two sides are going to match up. And then from there, you should be able to form the proportions and you should be able to solve. So, any questions? So, the top is going to tell you. So, in the previous section, they already had everything all nice and neat and in the same direction for you. This time, they're not doing that. So, they're trying their best to see if you can figure it out. And you can if you use the top. So, you got 3 sections here. You got to tell if it's similar or not similar first. You got to set up your proportions, and you gotta solve if they are in the same direction and everything first, and now you gotta see if you can set it up if they turn them, and you can solve it. Now tomorrow we are gonna do section 3, we are gonna do, mid-segments of triangles. It is very easy, I planned on doing that part today, but we didn't get to, because it's very, very easy. So, any questions? Okay, you will get a worksheet that looks